A story about Joseph Kingman, a true force, brought forward by the basic human intelligence to survive and the nature to question and oppose the ideologies of those who claim sanity. Chapter 1. Joseph was a small boy growing up in a cottage on a farm on the outskirts of a small town, a town where only small things happened. Predictable like clockwork, the small number of people who occupied this town remained in their routines and rarely thought of anything outside of the town's existence. Joseph's father, Mark, was an antique rescue and restoration man. You know, he fixes the broken things. He finds the problem, repairs it by gluing the stuff up and sells it on, or gives it back. Joseph would always have to explain. His mother, Helen, liked baking pies, but never ate any of them, ever. Sure do love the smell of those pies, Princess Joseph stated, imitating his father. The pies, always perfect, all sorts of flavors, some loved, others were loathed. For instance, lamb's brains and gravy was always a winner. However, every pumpkin surprise was always frightfully dreaded for its surprise. Collecting the currants for the dessert pie was one of Joseph's favorite jobs. He always ate as many as he could, collecting them. On arriving back to the house with the currants filled to the brim of the basket he carried, Helen would always thank him with a smile and a giggle, saying, "Thank you, Count Dracula. I'm forever your humble servant." Joseph didn't learn about Count Dracula until later on in life, when he did finally realize the joke his mother had always insisted on repeating every time he collected the currants for the pie, the laughter, bellows, and echoes of a punchline that long lived. As a child, the dark red and purple currant juice had been staining his lips and chin for days. Although Joseph had many animals on the farm, cows, horses, sheep, chickens, and the lone fox every now and then, none of them were ever pets. There were more animals than Joseph could care for alone. None of them were cared for like pets. They were all regarded as stock, work animals, breeding, or for eating. Pets were almost foreign to Joseph. Joseph remembered in a trail of thoughts trying to explain a pet to his mother. "You know a pet? One of those fluffy things you love and hug and kiss and all that? Nah, I ain't never had a pet then. I guess, I think, I would like that. I'd call it Calvin and it could lay on my bed at night." By a twist of fate, Calvin did come into Joseph's life. It does not matter for this origin story, nor the matters of his fate, such as being long rested by the pine trees. There were many animals called pets in the years to come. Joseph did not want another one. One day Joseph was asked to join his parents in the living room, where Joseph was informed that his mother was pregnant and they would soon be celebrating the birth of a baby sister. A quick few months pass and Quinn, blue eyes, wide to the world, with her first birthday and another loved fluffy pet joining the family, and shortly after will surely meet its demise, buried under the pine tree, eaten by the earth, and will be gone, like those before and like those after. You see, it's not to be sinister, but these dogs, cats, mice, guinea pigs, had all met a natural demise, by land, nature, water, fever, or natural disaster. None have lasted forever, ever. Dead. The perspex lid on the guinea pig's cage is really warm. It was in the full sun roasting out there. I've had a quick look, but all I could see were fluff balls. Joseph explained the fluff balls to his father. "Well, they're gone," his father stated bluntly. Joseph built the stained memories of each loved pet and how it met its demise. Joseph had a curiosity growing inside and began contemplating the coincidental reflections that fueled the spontaneous deaths. "Dad, Madison had 4 pups, now I can only see 3. Where is the third?" A loud crunch came from the corner of the dog shed, staining the brain with an image to never forget. Madison had eaten her newborn puppy. Over the next few weeks she continued to eat random items and the behavior excelled anything healthy. The dog was beginning to eat her own shit. She was put to rest due to tick venom poisoning her brain. Chapter 2. Who are you? You are who? A gift is always welcomed, especially when the gift is given by those admired, affirming a bond, a connection, a timeless thought, imprinting a permanent moment of admiration. For Joseph, this was when his father invited him into his workshop. The barn was full of antique furniture, half-repaired parts stashed and stored like a jungle of puzzles waiting to be assembled, fixed and put back together, restored for a second life, limbs of a table made to a chandelier now hanging from the roof and spinning on what was once a wagon wheel. His father led him to the workshop table. On the table, an item covered with a red cloth stained in pine oils. His father dramatically built up the anticipation, ever so slowly removing the cloth. Through the reflective shimmering of the sunlight pouring through the window, Joseph's blurring eyes became clear. He rubbed his eyes to see a lime green box with the label Boston. Written below that was 2000 FM radio, the shiny silver tuning knobs, a wide range of station selection, a long-range antenna, pulled to its tallest peak. Joseph, in a moment of shock, joy and excitement, took a moment to thank his father and asked, "Father, is this an early gift because I'm turning 8? His father replied in a cracked voice, "No, son, it's because He cleared his throat. Joseph understood his father's brutal attempt to say "I love you." Joseph's father continued on to say, "Wanted to give you something just for you," hugging Joseph head to chest, with a pat on his head. Joseph was set on his way back to his room to power up his Boston 2000 FM radio. He began tuning through the festivities of jazz music, tuning through and hearing for the first time classical guitar, violins, trumpets, voices of enlightened wonders. Like spices unheard before, sounds flooded the ears with a warmth ruminating down Joseph's spine and meeting the sound of bass on the floor. As the frequency merged with his heartbeat, adrenaline flooded the brain, producing a natural dopamine high, releasing the undeniable urge to dance one never felt before. Of all the new sounds to be heard, it was a voice that emerged from the tradition of static to station, a voice that at first could be mistaken for a vibrant advertising campaign meant for an audience of military personnel, a voice crisp, deep in sound, but with an upbeat tone that seemed positive and irritatingly likable. As the voice spoke from a classic age, the words danced and rolled off the tongue as if every word was premeditated and practiced to perfection. The voice in the radio was soon known to be Leroy Harvey, a professor of historical education and a hobbyist of herbal medicine. As the professor introduced himself through radio, Joseph listened with concentration and all other sounds faded away into the distance. Professor Leroy spoke of many adventures, tales of discovery, cures and ailments from foreign lands where only the bravest men travel. Joseph listened, dreaming of the discoveries and adventures beyond a small farm in a small town. Learning and listening was his escape. Of all admirations, it was Leroy's voice Joseph was listening to, a sense of optimism in each phrase growing, creating an image of a tall man, well-spoken in every word, neat facial hair and top hat to match. To imagine, Joseph would move, to pronounce the sound of each word with his body, in the way Leroy would, to travel beyond the fragile town walls like Leroy did, to interact with the world only as Leroy would. Who are you? I am you. Joseph's desire to imitate grew intensely. Each practiced word, each movement premeditated and presented as upbeat, spinning a positive light into every word, every gesture, even if the conversation was of doom and gloom. The pronunciation would indicate the emotional intelligence of the person beyond their own years, now practiced and perfected. Who am I? A personality that needed a name. This couldn't be Joseph. It's just not him. A new name for a new personality, a new natural character. Pausing for a moment, "Hello, Joe." Joseph greeted himself in the reflection of the bedroom window. Joe, a name that seemed simple enough. Joseph went to work building an outfit for his new personality and alter ego, Joe. Of course his mother was happy to help when he asked for materials to make a mini tuxedo. "Why a mini tuxedo?" his mother, Helen, asked. "So I can look good," Joseph replied in a cool, calm voice. Without further questions, Helen began shaping and forming a mini tuxedo with complementary vest. The old paper design lay spread out as the materials were cut from curtains, the material that his father Mark had brought from the markets only weeks ago, Helen now donating them to her son's creative expression with cutting, weaving, shredding and reforming. When Joseph's father came in to see the carnage, Helen giggled, "Don't worry, dear. Those dreadful curtains were never going to hang from these walls." Helen and Joseph giggled. In a memorable moment, Mark paused, slowly turning around and crept his way out of the room. The giggles became hysterical laughter as they both rolled around on the floor holding their bellies for what seemed an eternity. After many hours, Helen had finished. Being creative, she made a reversible dark green jacket with a deep purple lining, purple slacks with matching braces sewn into the seam. The white boot covers gave a sense of gangster, however the complementing vest gave off an image of sophistication. Fashion perfection. Joseph's arms slid into each sleeve, with the sensation of the material on the skin transformative. Each leg gliding into position represented an ascension. Each button closed confirmed the perfection of the outfit. Parading the awesome tuxedo his mother had made, Joseph looked in the mirror fixed to the living room wall. Staring for a moment, with his head tilted, the reflection reminded him of himself, Joseph decided that this face was not his face. It was not the face of Joe either. He had to make way for his alter ego. Joe and Joe would need a face. Being a supportive mother, Helen was happy to play along, providing a powder puff and mascara. Watching Joseph applying it himself was humorous to Helen. Joseph, now as Joe presented himself to Helen with flair, the black patchy eyes, pale, white thick powder, green eyebrows and a touch of rose on the cheeks. The surprise turnaround scared Helen, causing a hiccup laugh that she had to swallow quickly to save any embarrassment. The fully formed Joe, now and forever, basking in glory. Joe turned to Helen, greeting her for the first time as this spontaneous personality. "Hello dear Helen. I hear you've been good to me, with cups of love and plates of hugs, keeping away those nasty bed bugs." The fashion and form of Joe as he twisted and turned was distorted and deliberate. He articulated each word as if plucking it from the air with his fingertips, premeditated words blended with movements as he awaited her reply. Proud and happy Helen reciprocates. "Go show your father." Making his way to the shed, Joe knocked on the workshop door, filled with anticipation of his father's reaction. "Tappity tap tap," Joe said with flair. "Yeah, come through." Mark was sitting at his workbench as Joe approached. The smell of stain filled the air. Mark turned. "Wow, hello you." Mark welcomed Joe. "Hello, Mark. How's the work?" asked Joe. "Good, buddy, but I do have to ask, who do we have here? I've never seen this one before." "Who are you?" Mark played along with the show and tell performance. Joe, his father repeated. "That is me. Now you see, this is me." Happy like a buzzing bee, Joe expelled in the confined space of the workshop. Mark chuckled and asked if he could add to this perfect disaster, turning to his workstation, grabbing the paintbrush from a tin of some sort, tapping off the excessive residue. "Happy? Hey, well, let's put a smile on that face." Joe excitedly agreed. Placing one hand on Joe's head, the paintbrush ran ear to ear, as if being empowered with enlightenment and independence by Sword. This statement created an outrageous smile that perfectly aligned to the egotistical values of the newly formed personality, now truly a Kingman, a celebration in what was Joe's first initiation ceremony. The thick oily brush gave a cold sensation as the liquid smeared over his lips. Joe felt every bristle, as it glided from mouth edge to outer cheekbone and coming back again, covering both sides with an oily black paint. "Now, who are you?" Mark asked Joe. "Joe," he replies. Mark corrected Joe, saying, "You are Joe Kingman." "Joe Kingman," rippled and repeated, "Joe Kingman, Joe Kingman, Joe Kingman, Joe Kingman." The name Joe Kingman resonated, repeating throughout space and time, forever. For the name Joe Kingman is a name that will change a future, create a culture and drive freedom revolution to the limits. A legacy unchallenged and unforgiving, idealized in memorable moments, to be obsessed by all his people and feared by those who oppose the obsession. Joe had worn his tuxedo and matching accessories for 3 days straight and was advised by Helen to wash and change. This turned into a demand, and the demand must be performed immediately. Joseph had returned. In the following days, Joseph dreamed of being Joe Kingman again. What would he do? Who would he see? What would the future hold? How to represent Joe, as his small world dramatically expands and develops new thoughts and ideas. How will nature develop the demand of natural selection? How to survive, to become consciously evolving and live free as nature wants us to be. On a day like all other days, with Mark was out on a market hunt, turning his trade, as he often said, Helen preoccupied in the kitchen. Joseph thought this would be a perfect time to visit Joe Kingman. The tuxedo slipped on, face makeup applied. Joseph went on the hunt for the final phase of the transformation ceremony. Finding his way through his dad's workshop with dim light fluttering through the window, he located the paintbrush as used before, smearing the oily residue from inner mouth edge to outer cheekbone. The oily residue painting a smile from cheek to cheek. Joe paused, stepped forward into the light. The oil instantly began to burn, blister and bubble. It was not oil. He had not seen what his father applied previously and assumed it was the same substance. However, regrettably it was not. It was a chemical called euphonic acid, a powerful and effective paint stripper. Joe's face was burning like fire, the acid fizzling, the stretching of the skin breaking, detaching, deteriorating, as if melting to the bone on both sides of his face. The screams of horror filled every cell, pumping hot blood throughout the nervous system. Despite the agony, a permanent smile had found its way to Joe's face. In a state of panic, he tried scratching and rubbing his face with his fingers, trying to rub the intoxicating pain of the acid away. The acid spread to his fingertips, melting away the top layers of flesh. With one last breath, Joe screamed out in tormented pain. The acid blistered and bubbled, exposing raw flesh from inner mouth edge to outer cheek. As he screamed, the cracked trails of white and black makeup seeped into chemical compounds that leaked down the edges into the exposed flesh, now permanently embedded. Mixed with applications of the powder foundation, the color seeps into the carnage of damage to the tissue and raw flesh. This would be the final face that would be buried into the minds of millions and feed on the souls infested with fear. Helen, hearing the cries, ran into workshop, knocking shelves, lumbering over the bits and pieces, leaping forward in a race to get to her son lying on the floor. Coming closer and seeing carnage, Helen, screaming in shock, falls to the floor, knocking the table, causing everything to fall in all directions and tipping the euphonic acid over. The entire tin spilled, pouring over the bench. A liquid moved like lava, making its way to the edge of the bench, just above where Helen lay. The acid dribbled off the bench, splashing Helen with the fiery liquid, spraying the side of her face in a violent mass, hitting her ear, melting away flesh, hair. Half of Helen's face is mutated, blistering with gestating pain. The acid made its way through the inner ear, the blood cells flushing the searing acid, scorching the brain, burning fundamental fragments of humanity from Helen's fragile mind. She could only inhale air, as she threw back her head in pain, twisted, bent, frozen in pain. The fear forced every muscle to be squeezed, filled with terror and torment. As she lay there fading into darkness, Joseph remained unconscious and unaware of the misfortune that had followed his experience. Helen, seeing him there, let out a scream and fell unconscious, a misfortune that life has exposed, with a trail of natural events, the smell, the taste, the unshakable dread of a life before death moment. As they both lay unconscious, help faded into the land of dreams. Joe remembered seeing stars fill his eyes, then darkness came before the light filled the room, timeless like a dream, nightmares in dark corners waiting for the opportunity to be dreamt. This would be known as the second near-death experience. Regrettably, this fate sealed Helen into a spiral of pain and misery, facing a disconnection to her family and life itself. As the medical report later read, Helen displays two personalities. One aspect still has hope, love and care. The second personality is bitter, dizzy and foul, willing to rely on chance, gambling at the edge of life. She displays aggressive, impulsive and unpredictable behavior, Helen has harmed herself and others. Maximum security required. As for Joe's fate, this was only the beginning of the rest of his life. Chapter 3. The death of our father. Lying in a white bed with white sheets surrounded by white walls, a boy with scars for life, recovering from a serious injury. Turn it off, cracked a rumbled broken voice filled with irritation and dislike. From then on, the lights were permanently kept dim. Consumed by pain, every utterance was forced through a burning reminder of the healing flesh, so he refused to speak. The greeting of nurses, the passing of doctors, became like plates of windowed glass, thin and transparent, moving past in moments of time. When he needed treatment, Joe learned to look past these meaningless interactions, learning what was just enough communication to seek what he required. If he was thirsty, he learned a smack of his lips to those listening would be enough to meet his needs. If he needed to use the bathroom, a small struggle out of his bed was enough to get assistance. This learning continued. Joe, although he was now only 10, wondered why speaking was so important to human nature and why the interpretation of communication between each other happened in such a way. Joe had many questions, but this question was a fire burning to be enlightened. Why are humans the only species to talk? Why are they gifted with a lies, a love, a laughter, the stories passed from father to son? Why humans and no other species? Then, for the first time in his year in hospital, Joe heard another's child's voice. The voice of the child was matched with fast footsteps, running. The door burst open and quickly closed, as he heard a child hiding behind the corner chair. In the dim light, only shadows could be seen as Joe called out, through his bandages and healing scars, "Who's there? Is there someone there?" "It's Joseph, silly. Too much sleeping has made your brain all mushy," the child's voice replied. The human race is at the height of an evolution. It has worked its way across the globe, spreading periodically in time, evolving, changing, coming to a climax. But evolution only allows one winner, so the humans will war. Those wars will consume the souls of many, and for ages, the battle will continue until there is only one race, one human, one being, said the little boy solemnly. Joe expelled his breath. "I see," ready to reply, and excited for conversation. Joe raised the light a little to see the face that had come to visit. The first visit. Joseph. That's a nice name. Joe felt some ease in the moment of connection, distracting the pain of his face. A nurse, walking past Joe's door, stumbled in, surprised. He spoke. "Did you know he could do that?" she asked her colleague close by. "No, I've not heard him do that." "Who was he speaking to?" asked the orderly. Joe looked at the chair to continue the conversation. There was nothing but an empty chair. There was no boy there, and the nurse was acting as if there never was. "Are you okay over there, Joe?" she asked. Joe scoffed in despair, then rolled and curled in a ball on his white bed with white sheets. Tears of loneliness filled his eyes, and as they fell onto the sheets, they turned from white to red. Through the damaged tissues of his nasal passages and scalded tear ducts, watered-down tears of blood were wiped away with his white sleeve. Seeing the stains, finally, some color, Joe laughed. The nurses reported Joe's talking to no one and his joke about the blood to Dr. Kent. A man with glasses and a clipboard walked into Joe's darkened room looking all puffed up and powerful. "Joseph Kingman, why is the light so dim, son?" the man asked Joe, with a cracked and broken voice, a dry smack of the lips. Joe leaned forward, making a shadow through the light. "Well, which one are you, my father or Joseph?" asked Joe with a voice in pain but with upbeat tone. "I'm Dr. Kent," the doctor said with hand to chest. "Is that so, nurse?" Joe called out in alarm. The nurse came rushing to the bedside. "What's the matter?" she asked. "I think one of the patients has escaped and found their way to my bedroom," Joe stated to the nurse. "Why would you think that, Joe?" she asked. "Well, you see that fellow standing there with hand to chest? He called me son. Then he said his name was Joseph. Now he's claiming to be a doctor," Joe explained calmly to the nurse. "Well, this is the most I've heard you talk, Joe. That fellow there, well, he's your doctor, and yes, he is a doctor. He is a neurophylogenetic rehabilitation psychologist, she explained. The doctor and Joe talked for some time, nothing focused, nothing deep or outrageous, a conversation, the first in a long time, but like many others, mundane, medically focused, until Kent's questions went more in-depth about family members and bloodlines. Kent avoided the questions from Joe about the outside world, days lost, evidence of change as months joined years and years began to blend. Joe the young boy, grew into a young man, taller, thinner, lankier and slinky-like, a face unseen hidden beneath the bandages, left with fragmented memories of a life that existed so many years ago. Dr. Kent gathered as much information about the young man to begin the first stage of an experimental treatment. Information, vital information. Kent dreams up a reality of his long thought-out plan, perfected on paper. Blood samples, vials of eliminating green liquid are ready to implement his well-thought-through plan perfected by madness. The transformation of a young man into an unseen force of darkness goes unnoticed by colleagues, as Kent is driven by an obsession to heal his own son. Over years the plotted plan he perfected, for the implementation of the experiment on this young man. Joe's treatment by Dr. Kent began pretty rough. It was a punishment for thousands of sins before they were made. As Dr. Kent was the only real interaction Joe experienced, Joe learned to look forward to his treatments. Joe welcomed a friend called pain, the routine date. Falling in love with emotional pain and the physical treatment of drugs and wires became addictive, longed for. He longed for more of the same. It seemed insane. Is this how life is meant to be? Every week, it's a relationship. Honeymoon period, baby, Joe said excitedly to the nurse as she accompanied him towards Dr. Kent's treatment facility once again. The nurse thinks Joe is showing the cracks of insanity. She fears his mind grows dark, with no light to view and escape. Love what you have or die alone. As the good doctor described during most sessions, the electro-binary formulates into waves matching the human brain waves to induce a healing process. This pulsates around the body with blood being the conductor, sparking cells to regenerate. The treatment turned Joe's skin pale, drawing the blood from his cells to fuel the rage. Rage through his body. The rage pulsated, activating each cell with adrenaline and electricity. The humming of the electric pulse resonated through each cell, bone, each vein. Violent vibrations burned to the confusion of euphoria and tormented flesh. Throughout the sessions Joe remained silent. No strain or struggle. Joe just grinned within the bandages. Laughing replaced screams of pain, as if time stood still. The stress on his body and bleach of the chemicals finally turned his 15-year-old hair gray and fading white. Lethargic and unable to move, every muscle worked and pounded. He was limp, numb, left without much care. His transporters dragged Joe to the cleansing chair. Powerless to defend with his weak body, Joe was thrown backwards, dunked into a green compound made at the doctor's discretion, as if in slow motion. The chair fell backwards into a tub filled with unknown goop. The doctor's face lit up with excitement. "A rapture, my boy," Dr. Kent stated in a deep ominous tone, as he brought his hand to Joe's forehead, dunking Joe further under the goop. As Joe struggled for breath, the slow rising bubbles reached the surface, the bubbles screaming with his fighting breath, until silence. Under the goop, Joe's eyes filled with stars. The last breath left his body, familiar already. He eased his body into his third near-death experience. Eternity in moments fragmented by the pulsating brain reaching for life. The goop parted, as Joe arose, gasping for air. As he threw himself to the side of the tub, the goop dribbled to the floor from his hair. Joe's hair was green from the chemically concocted formula. Without care, his feet dragged along the ground as he made his way back to his room, where he is thrown back into the darkness. The infusion sessions to heal the broken cells had been frequent, a daily routine that became expected, until one day they just stopped. No apology, no goodbye, nothing. Not even a "see you later," Joe exclaimed aloud when the doctor didn't show for the third day. All the pain and he's just gone. For the first time in a long time Joe felt rage. Rage that filled his head and pumped his heart. Rage filled his body. Rage. The room was ripped apart. Joe's red tears fed color to the walls. Rage. Rage. Hours passed like minutes. It wasn't until the sun arose from the night that Joe felt calm enough to sit still, doing so for days after. Still. Catatonic. Weeks passed. Joe overheard the nurses talking while changing the beds. "Didn't you hear what happened to Dr. Kent?" "No, I didn't," the other nurse replied. "Well, he was at the theater with his missus and their 2 little boys. 3 fellas broken out of the back alleyway. They shot the doctor and his wife, cutting them down in a botched robbery. Both parents killed in front of the little ones." "What, really? What else do you know?" the nurse asked the other. "Well, it seems the Kent family were coming out of the theater just as the crooks ran out of the jewelry shop and pop, pop, pop. Apparently the little ones, Clark and Bruce, would have been shot as well, but one of the robbers fumbled before running off. Poor little ones, probably off to an orphanage. I don't know how Bruce will go. He's only just had a surprise recovery from some mysterious disorder where he couldn't walk. He's still on crutches and is barely able," the nurse finished breathlessly. Joe stood up in shock. He couldn't believe the relationship was over. Powerless. Powerless to express the pain and the rage. No grief, no turmoil. Rage, just rage. Undirected, internal rage. Joe made his way slowly to the chair wedged into the corner of the room, sitting in the darkness. Days passed, weeks even, years. Joe was lost, peering through the shadows lurking on the darkest edges of the mind's ability. On a day like all other days, the door opened in a flood of burning light. "Joseph," a small voice questioned. As the light eased on his eyes, his sister Quinn's face came into focus. "Quinn, my darling, is that you? You've grown up. What's happened in these years past? All doom and gloom, I suppose?" For hours Joe asked Quinn questions, drawn between breaths, his voice deep and cracking with each word, painful when spoken. However, behind the words and the pain, an upbeat tone drowned out the frightful observation made in the shadow as he spoke. "Look what I brought you. Your Boston radio." Brother Quinn exclaimed with hope of some excitement from Joe. "No such luck." "What? No hug? No kiss, just because you're ugly? Pucker up, MR. I love ya." Quinn playfully covered Joe with kisses through the bandages and green hair that covered most of his face, the bandages dampening the contact. However, he still felt all the impact of a place called home. Over the next few hours they could be heard crying and laughter at the jokes and rumble like siblings would. A moment of peace, a moment of clarity that everything will be all right. Quinn would often catch the bus to the recovery unit to visit her brother and mother, until the day her mother no longer recognized who she was, lashing out in violence, issuing crazy profanities of wild prophecies of the world and its demise. Not long after Quinn visited and time was spent differently, 1 year passed to the next. Her brother was moved to a unit closer to the family home. In these visits Joe learned that their father Mark had been jailed for robbery where 2 innocent people were killed in front of their children, Bruce, and the older son Clark. Mark claimed in the courts that he was trying to raise money for his dying wife and sick child, trying to pay for hospital bills and treatments. Mark also agreed to Dr. Kent's experimental treatments on his son Joseph. Mark felt the burn on his soul, sacrificing his humanity to the side effects that would lead to death. However, before his death is dismissed so quickly, Mark's story led to unfortunate events that must be told for Joe's story to unfold. During his struggles, driving back and forth, questioning each day, Mark often asked the naked air, "Where's the money going to come from? I could move work, but then the kids. I can't afford a sitter. Shit. I'm struggling to pay for gas and dinner. The kids are getting thinner." On this particular day Mark was driving, questioning the very air he breathed, life seeming hopeless. The rain began to fall on the windscreen, the fuel was running low. Stopping at the servo, filling with what he had in his pocket, Mark went in to pay for the gas, like every other time. He jumped in and started the car, driving onto the wet road and into the distance. "Please don't kill me," a voice squeaked from the back seat under an old dusty jacket. Mark jumped, swearing out loud, holding his heart. What the fuck? Who the fuck? Mark questioned, already knowing it was a female from the voice. A young woman pulled her head out from under the jacket, keeping herself hidden. She uncovered her face. A beautiful blonde young lady, trying to cover a bruised eye. What's going on? Mark asked. I'm so sorry, it's my boyfriend. He was hitting me and I needed to get away from him, so I just started running. I'm sorry if I scared you, mister, the girl apologized. What's your name? Mark asked. Harley, she replied. I'm Mark. They got to know a little of each other on the drive, the situations that arise and how we fight or take flight. Mark enjoyed the company, so he drove and just kept driving, forgetting all direction. The tank read low and the sun fell to the horizon. Harley and Mark made their way back to Mark's family home, being just what he needed, what she needed, an answer to his prayers, a person to help, someone to be there. Harley's company was great, but she was a rabbit. She often had explanations to what this meant. The best one was, I am a rabbit, you see, running, jumping, always moving, you see. It may look pretty, me jumping, running, looking free, but I'm not free. Rather always escaping, jumping into the air to escape the snakes, running on the ground to escape the birds, dashing between the trees to escape predators and unknown enemies, but still I feel pretty jumping and running. I love the rush of dashing past, under and over everything else as it seems to move ever so slower than me. Harley became very comfortable in the home. She always had a sense of shameless behavior, whether it being saving money by stealing toilet paper from the public toilets, walking in her underwear to the clothesline, taking the neighbor's coupons, or doing reverse charity stall. She was always funniest at night, pretty, clever, and a super bright light. Mark was falling in love. Quinn was also falling in love with Harley, but you can't keep a free spirit held down. A rabbit will run, for freedom, for fun. Harley and Mark had fun for a time, but with Harley's connection to the underworld of crime, she contacted a friend of a friend. Her efforts to help led to Mark's demise, incarcerated for a crime that left 2 people dead and 2 children without parents. Guilt led to his end, hanging from the jail cell. Harley ran. Quinn was forced to find her own path and always found her way back to the family home. Over the years the house fell in disrepair and decay, the animals long gone, the work shed burned to the ground by Mark in a fit of rage some time ago. Quinn would often reside there for days, hoping her only friend, Harley, would return, until one day she did. On a day like all others' days, Quinn looked down the long dusty driveway, seeing a figure walking towards the house, hips swaying side to side. Harley, Quinn exclaimed, running to her open arms. Harley had returned. With Harley's returning to the family home, Quinn and Harley reconnected. Quinn in Harley's care. Harley became a mentor for Quinn, and the scams, the sins, the magic, the glitter, the glamorous lies, a life of a rabbit. These are the years that formed the name and the life of Harley Quinn, where priorities changed and family were neglected. During these years, Helen went unvisited, unloved and alone. The touch of human flesh became a wasted dead land of wishes. Many years later the unit in the hospital burned to the ground, with faulty wires being the cause. Some survivors returned after rebuilding, but Helen's body was never found. Chapter 4: Cause of Nature or Curse of Nature. Thank you, Tesla, for radio. The rat utopia experiments, murmured Joe as he lay amongst soft cushions in the rehab room. Delivered to you on live radio. Reports coming in weekly, with scientific interviews and extended documentary coverage narrated by Professor Leroy Harvey as he presents Red Utopia and the Behavioral Sink, Dominated and Subdivided. The Rejects, the Beautiful Ones, social groups take form. Leroy described the Rat Park Society with great excitement, stating the rats have been provided with a safe place away from the elements, predators, supplied with food, water and an addictive drug called morphine. Professor Leroy's voice continued, what would overpopulation in Rat Utopia look like? The caged pen, built like a small city. The behavioral sink began when the rat population hit its peak. Differing personalities fight for dominance. Social placement is enforced. Lessons learned well by Joe, who developed his own impressions of the human society from the relevant words that simulate evolution or demise. Among the chaos and anarchy, the social conformity and domination, there remained one type of rat that was undisturbed by greed and placement in the order. They were the beautiful ones. The beautiful ones remained unchallenged, unfastened by the surroundings. They remained healthy and beautiful. The beautiful ones represent the beauty that the species could achieve, something to treasure as their world fell to decay, death, despair and desperation. In the final report they all fell, driven to the edges of hell in their own extinction. The experiment was terminated, concluding that population growth is unsustainable even under perfect conditions, an unforgettable impression of human society. In a curse of nature, the now 19-year-old Joe was transferred to a new facility. Joe read in a whisper from the brochure as he traveled on a transportation bus. Arkham Asylum, a place of recovery for those needing humanity, with daily activities to make learning fun. Our clients learn long-term skills to sustain them once they leave our doors to continue into a new brave world beyond. Left single quotation mark. A voice from over his shoulder squeals, "It's all bullshit, you know. D all fucking bastards and D," and continues, "This shit is nuts. The place is for crazy people, the sick and the insane, slave labor and torture. If you don't conform or if you complain, I heard they pull out white teeth and they claim your violent behavior is a danger to other people. They'll lock you up and throw away the key, bro. Why never to be seen again because," the man spoke in a strange unknown accent. Joe had never heard the accent before, not even through his Boston radio. "I'm sure it will be fine," Joe replied calmly to the frightening voice coming from the seat behind him. The voice asked, "Shit man, what happened to you?" questioning the bandages that covered Joe's face. Turning to answer, Joe saw a man with darkened skin, like he had been in the sun and tanned instead of burning. His wide brown eyes staring, his large lips protruding from his face, his tight black locks of hair bounced with the bumps of the road. Joe had never seen a man with that skin color before. Coming from a small town with small-minded people, the town rarely had visitors. Joe only had a radio to imagine what the outside world would like. Joe replied, "Tell me first what happened to you, what fella, what shotgun?" The voice asked, "Why so dark? Was it too much sun?" Joe asked, "What there fella? You never seen a black fella? A black fella like me, with me beautiful brown skin, me beautiful big brown eyes, me brown curly hair and perfectly white teeth?" The dark man replied, "No, never." "Well, mate, okay then. I'm Barry, a black fella, Aboriginal. I'm the only me. My mob, they're expecting me home and I'm going the wrong direction." Joe asked many questions after the introduction, with Barry forgetting his questions about the bandages that masked Joe's face. Over the next few days they become closer and more like friends, sharing stories over meals in the mess hall. Joe learned of Barry's heritage, his family culture, how his people come from the stars, how they lived as one with land and nature, until one day, like all other days, Barry's people were tricked when they offered kindness to a herd of lost souls floating on the sea, welcoming the white spirits onto the lands. The white spirits were not lost souls, but dark entities that sought to feed and consume our lands and our people. We learned of dystopia, the meaning of greed, domination, of death. My people slid into the land of dreams, walking in the stars until they find a home once again. Barry liked to talk a lot, fast-paced and quickly spoken, his language sometimes hard to understand. However, his stories were always intriguing, with tales of walkabouts and dreamtime journeys with spirit guides and totems. During Joe's interactions with his new friend, Barry told his origin story and explained how he was really crazy, concluding that he must be, because he believed what happened to be true. He felt it, had seen it with his eyes, smelled it, tasted it on his tongue. His world had changed like the first rising sun, unbelievably true. But what happened has no proof, no evidence. It can't be repeated. A story so outrageous it's laughable. But still Barry believed it to be true. landing him in this here crazy zoo. A wildlife ranger stuck in a storm. Time forced into a flash. Barry Allen. Reborn. Why, I wouldn't believe it, brother. I'm a qualified wildlife ranger, out doing my normal routine. A storm rises and gathers above, lighting crashes, fucking boom, boom, boom. I was shitting myself. I ran to the Jeep, thinking, get out of there, fuck me, foot to the floor, boom, boom, boom. The sound shakes the Jeep. The rain falls, falling heavily. The large droplets cover the windscreen and wipers come on. Oh shit, boom, boom, boom. What the fuck? It's getting closer. Boom, boom, boom. Then fuck me from nowhere. The world's biggest fucking kangaroo was right there in front of me. The fucker was massive. Then boom, the fucking thing hit the Jeep, flipping it to the side. I'm thinking, fuck me, the fucker must be hurt. Then a flash of lighting hits the Jeep, cracking the windscreen. I see the beast light up, its eyes glistering in the reflection of light. Then it leans back on its tail and with its fucking massive legs, kicks the Jeep, sending us rolling down into a gully. I climbed out the broken window, thinking it was gone. Then I hear boom boom boom, snap bang boom. With the breaking of branches and trees, the fucker was chasing me. So I ran. Boom boom boom. Is that the fucking roo or the sound of my beating heart? So I'm running through the gully and down a muddy bloody hill. At the bottom it opened to a water hole, so didn't even think, I just jumped. But you wouldn't believe it. As I jumped, I was struck by lightning. An electric lightning bolt hit me and forced me down, deep into the water hole, down to the bottom. I'm thinking I was going to die or already dead. Eels swim close, groups of something else biting each shoulder. My body moves along the water's bottom, across the rocks and up the edge, the eels flipping and flapping, waving. They leave me on the water's edge where snakes slither over my body like a part of nature, like I'm a warm bloody rock. There I lay still, used, until, boom, boom, I sat up covered in mud, slipping and sliding to get out of the mud. I feel something new, reborn or some shit like that. Then boom, boom boom, oh fuck me. So I get up and I fucking run. I run fast. Boom, 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 behind me, run. I reckon this thing's gonna get me. I can go faster. Run Barry run. I try. Faster and faster, boom. Faster I go. Bullshit, fuck me Barry. Run Barry run, I said to myself. Boom, 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 it's right behind ya, faster Barry. I'll turn to a blur. As I ran faster, all seemed to disappear into light, silence, and then when I stopped running, I was naked, in a place I didn't know. Flashing lights around me, my heart pounding, then bang, I'm tackled to the ground by some big fella in a SWAT suit, bagged me head and dragged here. Crazy right? Not so crazy as Joe would soon learn. Chapter 5 Strange New Friends. Through the daily educational activities, Joe learned how to sew suits, quilt stresses. He learned yoga to relax the mind, earned extra coin for treats by making typo craft gifts sold to guards and inmates. Some really good pieces were auctioned to charity. Joe learned to clean, and cleanliness is godliness, a job Joe perfected. He learned to play poker. The game helped focus his body to relax his mind. Master ingredients for the game of poker. An annual tournament that involved all qualifying inmates. Joe learned that facial expressions are a key factor in the art of poker. The bandages that covered his face needed to be removed. For so many years the face hidden behind healing wounds and emotional damage. Joe had the faintest memories of Dr. Kent's experiments. The memories slowly faded into dreams leading to the land of nightmares. Little did Joe know that his face had long healed. All affected areas had been healed days after Kent's experiments ended. It was the nurses who were afraid of Joe's face, a reaction of repulsion to scar tissue that embedded a permanent impression on a young boy's face. They covered it up and hid it from the world. While the tissue had healed, vicious scars remained. The experiments had exponentially increased the healing factor of skin, organs and blood cells, but the healing had its limitations. The affected wounds would heal but not regenerate, turning wounds to scars. Limbs could not regrow, broken bones healed in months, cuts closed in days, but the evidence of injury remained. A face that embraced a new race of carefree people. Over time in Arkham, Joe met many faces. People who had lost a frame of mind, people caught in a loop of time, some of them only claiming the plea of insanity for a lesser punishment for the crimes they'd committed. Worst of these was a man called James Bain. Before his unmasking moment, Joe stood in the mirror's reflection. The moment of silence was disturbed by an image over his left shoulder. Bain stood behind him with the vicious look of sin in his eyes. Bain seethed. You can't play poker in that mask. Where's your fucking face? Show me your face. Show me your face. Fuck off, dick face, Joe replied. Bain raged at such a simple insult, charging at Joe and grabbing Joe's head with his big fist and smashing Joe's face into the glass. Joe was shocked and laughed out loud. What the fuck? You think this is funny? Fuck you, funny man. Bain spat verbal insults as his fist clenched for an uppercut. The brute force lifted Joe off his feet, his bottom jaw smashing to his upper lip. Without haste, Bain pulled back and the force of a 10-ton truck hit Joe's face. Teeth cracked and broke. Blood filled his mouth, but no pain was felt. Broken he was, but in pain he was not. Joe was on the floor up against a wall. He spat the blood and teeth from his mouth and laughed. Hey Bain, is that all you've got? Ha ha ha. Bain raged, charging again. From the floor Joe kicked up into Bain's face, sending him off balance and into the wall. Joe laughed like a hunter cornering his prey. Joe jumped onto Bain's chest, like a raging bull for riding, grabbing Bain by the head with both hands. He lowered his face to Bain's and bit into Bain's nose, gripping with his jagged broken teeth. Bain squealed in pain as his nose was torn from his face with nothing to grab onto but the blood-filled cloths that bandaged Joe's face. Bain, making direct eye contact with Joe for the first time, the green of Joe's eyes illuminate, hypnotic. Bain pulled the blood-stained bandages, peeling them from the fresh wounds and coagulated blood on Joe's face in an attempt to release the grip. As Bain's nose was removed from his face, so were the bandages covering Joe's wounded flesh, revealing Joe's unseen face, exposing a freakish flesh of a smiling man. Joe laughs at the victim yet to be. Ha ha ha, ha, snarled Joe. A rat looking for dominance, I see. Well, swell. Let's peel his face like a potato and open his brain like a tuna can. I want to see his face on my wall. I want to know what makes this Bain rat think he's man. As he spat out these words, Joe was holding Bain's nose like a cigar. Bain's blood dribbled down his hand and stains of blood covered his scarred lips like cherries. Bain screamed out, "You're fucking crazy, freak. Crazy fucking freaky fucker. My nose, my fucking nose. Really? Who would knows? Don't think anyone will notice," laughed Joe. He violently smashed his foot into Bain's mouth and stomped down hard to the ground, forcing Bain's jaw to dislocate, followed by his face as his head hit the floor. By this time alarms had been set, alerting staff. A voice from the speaker echoed, "Emergency in room 102. Guards entered as both men lay unconscious on the floor of the room. Hospitalized and operated on for hours, both men ended up with new additions to their faces. Joe's broken teeth mended with silver fillings and his wounds rapidly healed. Bain was now fitted with breathing apparatus permanently strapped to his head, breathing through tubes attached to a mask. Bain never made eye contact with Joe again. Chapter 6: The Escape. Leading up to the Great Poker Tournament, entrants were invited to rehearse in the hall where the games were played. The tournament was advertised to the patients over the speaker system. A circus act, one to bring magic and wonder, to provide entertainment in the intermission. All entrants will be sponsored by private founders whose generous donations will be put towards the asylum's rehabilitation programs. Each qualifying patient is sponsored by an individual who remains unknown for privacy and confidentiality. Winners are entitled to be fast-tracked to participate in the programs, a key function for successful transition back into the new world. Achieving a place in the qualifications rounds, Joe began making his self-tailored suit, perfect in every way with extra pockets to stash the halftime intermission snacks. The delicious sweets. This was in between electroshock therapy, setting up for a party and cleaning. A woman, in costume and makeup, practiced on stage almost constantly. She seemed familiar to Joe. She sang beautifully as she hung from the trapeze, with hoops and silks like jungle vines as she disappeared into the shadow of the red curtains. Little did Joe know, Quinn was now going by her alter ego Harley Quinzel. She had joined a circus that was soon to entertain those at the asylum where her loved one was held. Was joining the circus a coincidence? More so by intelligence and dedication. Harley gained the place of acrobat after just a few short weeks. She infiltrated the asylum, copying security cards. Sometimes she pretended to be a doctor. Was this out of curiosity? Maybe so, but she fulfilled the role just as a qualified person would. During her travels, she learned a bit of a lot. Powered by love, she learned the art of scamming cons too. You do what you have to do to survive, because life is for the living. Quinn would use these words often almost like a catchphrase. All the while she plotted an escape for two while mastering circus art and gymnastics. During a night like all other nights, Joe was woken in the darkness by giggling, heard through his open unlocked door. He walked through the open door and a whisper of laughter echoed down the cold drafty corridor. The sound of a bell bounced around the walls. Joe passed Barry's room. Looking through the small box window he saw electricity shaking Barry violently. There was no headpiece, no wires, just straps holding him down, as the blue electric currents sparked shooting trails of light all over his body in a self-contained electric storm. Am I dreaming? Joe asked himself. Hee. Delling ring. The sounds of a bell drew him closer. Through the silence of the walkway a calling was heard. NR. J, my J this way, silly. Quick before you're caught, a female voice led on into the darkness. Joe was suddenly pulled sideways into a cleaner's closet. A familiar voice whispered, I have a plan. Just follow my lead. When it's time, I'll give you a sign, okay? Joe was surprised and stunned. Am I dreaming? What's happening? Oh my dear. What have they done? You're all drugged up and not having fun. Wake up, silly. You've slept for too long. I love this ugly face. We will escape. Now, back to your room. Remember, stay off the meds, Mr. J, and wait for my signal. Joe made his way back to his room and fell asleep, and the conversation was remembered as a dream. Two nurses were whispering in the hallway. I heard there's going to be a disappearing act in the last intermission. That's very impressive. Apparently they pick someone at random and bring them on stage and zoom, gone. Unbeknown to the poker players, private funders are gathered high around a table in the Skyview station, placing wedges of notes for wages, worth millions, on each game, gambling on winners and foldouts, who advances and who loses out. Like a horse in a race, really. At the end there is only one first place. Live gambling at its greediest. On the day of the tournament, working his way through the ranks, Joe was working with a clearer head ever since taking the advice of the so-called dream from a voice in the night to stay off the meds. The excitement built. Finals round. Feeling clever in his suit, Joe stood tall, with his permanent smile. Dark circles hide his eyes that gloomed from under the brow and neatly groomed green hair, an individual indeed. The backings got bigger and wages grew higher, the funders dribbling as they chased the winner's sensation. Watching from the round table in the Skyview station, the founders' overview through mirrored glass and display screens. 4 Packer tables turned to 2 to 1, last table and still standing. Joe joined the last remaining contestants at the final table. The intermission begins. The act opens with lights, glitter and glam. One act follows the other, until drum rolls lead to popping balloons as ribbons fall from the roof. The spotlight circles the room 3 times before landing on Joe. It's you. A sign from above. A magical journey beginning for you, the announcer states. The confetti fell in all colors. Like a rainbow of snow they slowly fall to the floor. The announcer introduced the next and final act, as Joe makes his way to the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, never tried before. We will send this young man into the vacuum zone, a zone free of time, free of confined space, A world hidden within our own. A place of the unknown. Surprise! You're our lucky chosen one. Chosen for the disappearing act by the beautiful Harley Quinzel. Brought up to the stage, Harley held his hand and whispered, "This is the sign, just play along." Joe went into the magic box. A la Carzi, a la Carzambam. The announcer approached the stage, waving his hands through the fumes of smoke. He opened the box to see Joe had disappeared into thin air. Checking the box, the announcer said, "He's here. He's there and everywhere." The crowd does in wonder. Ooh-ah, and whispers break out. "Now let's bring him back, shall we? Just need to close it again. Say the magic words. A la Carzi, a la Carzam." We see the young man again. "Tada," he said to finish his act. He opens to an empty box. "Wait. We'll try again," he says as they all laugh. Closing the doors a la Carzi, a la Carzam, waving his hands across the box. "Now I will open it again." To see the young man, the box remained empty. Panic broke out on stage. Whispers trickled through the audience, thinking it was still a part of the show. The announcer gasped, "Ladies, gentlemen, the young man is gone." The audience laughed. "No, really, he's gone. It's not part of the act, he's gone," said the man as he searched the magic box, feeling around with his hands. "I don't understand," he muttered to himself. Security bells sounded, staff frantic. A search breaks out. The funders started to pack their money and hide their loot in a panicked rush. Crack, creak, cracks, cracking sounds came from the ceiling. Two people came crashing through the roof. Harley Quinzel and Mr. Joe Kingman fell onto the table where the funders hold their gambling funds. A mountain of money breaking their fall. Smash bang boom. The facility in lockdown. The funders ran for the exit to no escape. "Holy fuck shit, Mr. J, look at all this cash. Grab what you can and burn the rest," Joe stated, as the funders stood frozen in shock, watching bags of millions walk out the door. Harley Quinn, with an exit plan, led the way through a vent on the side wall, leaving behind them a wall of flames that crawled over all, consuming the building. Only a few, including Barry, made it out alive. A great escape. The rise of the most powerful couple to go against the law. Prince and Princess of Crime. Layer by layer becoming the Joking Man. A short fan fiction story written by Dylan Brassington.